Hey guys, today I want to talk about the X27q monitor that I purchased. So I recently did a review of the X32 monitor that I purchased, and it was a 32-inch monitor. It was from HP and I got it for 200 bucks. It's a pretty sweet monitor. I loved how big it was, but it had a couple of dead pixels and I ended up returning it. If it didn't have dead pixels, I would have kept it. And after looking at the HP X27q, I definitely would have kept the 32-inch monitor if it didn't have any dead pixels or any issues, because it was pretty sweet. So I've got them set up. This is the X27q, and this is my old VG248QE. It's a 24-inch TN panel. So I have a 24-inch TN panel, and I have my IPS panel. One of the biggest questions I had going from a TN panel to an IPS panel is it going to be fast enough? Now, the IPS panel is definitely slower, but it's still a really great monitor. And there have been a few reviews specifically for the X27q that I'm going to reference. Monitor Unboxed did one, so you can look up that, and Techless did another one. Both YouTube channels. They're pretty good, and they have much more in-depth and scientific ways of measuring things than I do. They all reviewed this monitor with the LG panel. So one of the sneaky things that HP is doing with this specific monitor, they sold this monitor with the LG panel, and now they're selling it with a different panel, a BOE panel, which I believe makes the experience worse. The long and short of it is, this is a great panel, and if you can get it for around $200, you're getting a screaming deal. I actually bought this for $150 in October 2022. So 200 bucks or $150 for 165 hertz 1440p IPS display is pretty sweet. Yeah, if you're worried about the X27q versus the X32, the 27-inch versus the 32-inch, they both perform about the same. So the 32-inch one may be just a titch slower by a few milliseconds, but honestly, that's kind of within I can't really test to that degree. Nobody's really, none of the big reviewers have really done any reviews on the X32. It's an excellent monitor. If you can get it for $250 or less, I'd say that's an excellent deal for the X32, which is also a QHD or 1440p monitor. When it comes to the stand is great. The stand does height, tilt, and pivot, but it doesn't do swivel. So it doesn't swivel on its stand, like back and forth and back and forth. So if you're adjusting it to show someone else something, you'll have to move the entire stand to do that. But it has good build quality. I really like the look of it. It looks really simplistic. It's not very gamery. You have the HP logo, fairly thin bezels, and I've got my a couple of cameras here, and that's it. I have it on a monitor stand, which I reviewed. You can go check that out if you want to. But there's that. When it comes to brightness and contrast, this thing does claim HDR 400. This is not an HDR monitor, so don't buy it for that. It's definitely not an HDR monitor, but it does get around 400 to 450 nits in terms of brightness. So other reviewers, and it only has like 8 dimming zones, so it's not an HDR monitor. It's just a normal monitor that gets pretty bright. And I have the brightness turned down, so there's buttons back here which you can click. I'm clicking the top one again. Let's see, let's scroll down. I'm scrolling up to the image. I have the brightness on 60, the contrast on 100. This is what I recommend for the image quality. Sharpness is level 4. That's essentially off. You don't want to turn on that. I don't have black stretch or dynamic contrast. In terms of, oops, I got rid of that. Let's bring it back. So going over the settings, this is an adaptive sync monitor. We do have AMD FreeSync Premium turned on. It does have the ability to do MPRT. We do have our response times. I'm at level 1 response time right now. That actually should be level 2. It's been kind of interesting. Yeah. So the best response time level is level 2. And we'll go over that in just a second. Okay, let's talk about refresh rate. This thing refreshes at 165 hertz. This refreshes at 144 hertz. They're both good. So the refresh rate's nice and fast, 165 times per second. This is not G-Sync certified, but G-Sync does work with it. But it is a FreeSync. It does have FreeSync, and it's premium, and it works great. Or adaptive sync, right? Adaptive sync works really well. I'm going to go ahead and hit start here, and you're going to see that we have two numbers here, and I'm going to freeze frame, and we're going to talk about the what you're seeing here on the screen. So taking a look at these two numbers here, the top one and the bottom one, remember the top monitor is the Asus, this is the TN panel, which I assumed was much faster than any IPS monitor, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Looking at these numbers right here, 9.199 versus 9.175, it tells us that the bottom monitor, the X27q, is actually refreshing much quicker than the VG248QE monitor that's sitting on top. So my decade-old monitor appears to be running a lot slower than the newer monitor that we have down here, the $150 monitor. That's kind of crazy. So I decided to take a look at RTings and validate that. Again, this shows some pretty interesting information. Here we have the VG248QE on the left and the HP 27q on the right. This is the input lag values that I pulled from the RTings website. So we can see the native resolution is 5.1 milliseconds for the Asus and 3.7 milliseconds, both at their maximum refresh rate. And the 3.7 milliseconds is obviously faster than the 5.1 milliseconds. The native resolution at 60 Hertz is 9.9 milliseconds on the Asus and 9 milliseconds on the HP monitor. And just looking at the black frame insertion, we can see that we have much lower input lag on the HP than we do on the Asus monitor. This was something that I didn't think, I thought this was reversed, especially in the last review that I did. We took a look at these numbers showing the two different times on the monitor, and I think I reversed them. So really, the IPS panel, the panel that's on the bottom, it's much quicker than the panel that's sitting on the top because we're still waiting for that 9.175 to refresh to 9.199. That's a big difference. We're talking about a 24 millisecond difference between these two monitors. And that's a lot. I mean, we're only seeing how much on RTings? Like 2 milliseconds, less than that. But we're seeing a 24 millisecond difference between these two monitors when we're just looking at them. This is a little interesting. I'm not sure what to think about these results. Maybe it has to do with my camera shutter speed, but I did them both side by side and top to bottom with very similar results. The same thing happened, so I don't believe it's my shutter, but let me know in the comments if there's some something that I just don't understand. So moving on to backlight strobing and MPRT. Not everybody likes to talk about this, and it's an interesting subject because MPRT, what BFI or MPRT or backlight strobing is where you're literally inserting a black frame in between everything else. And there's the setting right here. We can set this to be on adaptive sync, but if we turn adaptive sync off right here, it's going to flash real quick. It's going to turn adaptive sync off. So now that we have adaptive sync off, I can go down. I'm going to back out of this and go down to, oh, I went the wrong way. I can go to the MPRT and change this from level 1 to level 5. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to level 5. And I'm not sure if you can see it on the camera, but it's actually flashing now. So you can actually see it. And I'm going to change the the inputs to extend, and you're going to see that we're literally flickering now because we are using MPRT level 5, and we're going to go to, and we are now sitting on the Blurbusters website, and we are strobing. So if we do a chase, I'm gonna chase it. If we chase it, you can see there's some crosstalk right there, and we'll go to a different motion blur. No, not frame skipping. Strobing crosstalk, that's it. Okay, so this is gonna be a little crazy for a minute. So this is the strobing crosstalk. You can see there's some crosstalk because we are on level 5. We're gonna change this to a different setting. So level 5 is the highest. That actually gives us, it's the lowest amount of light, but it gives us the best ghosting reduction or blur reduction. So let's change it to level 3. So level 3, we still have quite a bit of crosstalk. And the crosstalk can be different from, so I'm in the middle of the screen right now. See, crosstalk is different versus the bottom of the screen. Crosstalk is also different. You can see on the top of the screen, crosstalk is actually worse than it is from the middle and the bottom. So that's why we do it on the entire screen, is crosstalk is going to be different from the top, the middle, or the bottom. So, but when you're looking at it, look at the trailing lines. Oh, and you pick a UFO and just follow it. Look at those trailing lines. Look how crisp and clean that is. The problem is we can see a double image here. And the double image sucks. So if we were to boot up a game or something, so let's just boot up. Let's boot up BattleNet and let's log into one of my favorite games, Heroes of the Storm. We are logged into the game. So you can see the thing that says target dummy. It's difficult to see on this screen, but maybe if I freeze frame it, you'll be able to see it. So when I do this, you can still read it, but it creates this double image or the crosstalk, and you can see it extremely well inside the game. So I just went ahead and froze this frame, and as you can see, let's just take a look at the target dummy text. I think that's going to be the easiest to see. So it says target dummy, and at the very beginning you can see 4 T's, a dark T, a bright T, and another bright T to me. I can see 4 T's, t-t-t-t. And that is very apparent when I'm actually playing the game. Yes, it makes it crisp, but I get 4 images on the screen. It's not refreshing fast enough, or the crosstalk hasn't been reduced enough for it to be actually playable. Does it reduce smearing? Yes, but it introduces other issues that I just can't get around. I can't get behind this version of MPRT or black frame insertion. It just does not work for me. But if we change it to, if we disable MPRT, so let's go ahead and disable MPRT here. If we disable MPRT, and then we're going to go back and re-enable adaptive sync. Okay, adaptive sync is on. Now we're going to go down to response time. We're going to change it to the correct one, which is level 2. Okay. And we can see we don't have like a frame rate thing. Our input's display port, so we're 165 hertz. And I can show you the frame rate here as well. So we're running at a couple hundred hertz right now. So even though we have 200 to 300 FPS, we're actually just displaying this image at 165 hertz due to the maximum refresh rate of the monitor. So we have re-enabled adaptive sync, and we're on level 2, which is the fast response time setting. And there are some differences here. We can still see 4 T's, T, 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 but the image is blurrier. And when it's actually in motion, when you freeze the frame, I like the crisp image better. But when it's in motion, this is much more palatable for the eyes. You don't see as many images. I can clearly pick out multiple images
when I have MPRT on, but when MPRT is off, it kind of blends it together and it looks better to me. Now, I'm a big fan of not having any blur, but I can't get behind this implementation of MPRT. People are saying that it's good, but it's really not good enough to be playable, so there's not even really a reason for this setting to exist because it doesn't work. And maybe it's better in different games or something like that, but for me, every time I turn it on, you get the flicker, you get the increased eye strain, and it's just not worth it for me in any games that I play. So that's a problem. And then if we look at MPRT level 5 versus adaptive sync level 2, side to side, you can see them right here. So it's much more crisp on the left, much more blended on the right. But again, I prefer adaptive sync to MPRT, and that's just going to be different. That's going to be a personal preference thing. But for me, you might as well not have MPRT because I'm never going to use it.
This is what it looks like at level 2. So this is with the FreeSync on. So we're going to go in here and we're going to take a look at these response times. So level 1 is going to be the slowest response time, and you're like, well, and you might be saying, Dave, why aren't they just on the fastest response time? Because I mean, that's what they advertise, 1 millisecond response time. Well, there's differences between the two. So here's level 1, and we're going to go in the middle of the road, and we're going to look at this. You can see there's a trail of black, and we'll pause right there. So there's a trail right there on that UFO. And if we move on to level 2, we don't actually have to click on it for it to happen. So it's going to change. So if I'm going to go from level 2, I'm going to go from level 2 to level 1. From level 1 to level 2. From level 2 to level 1. From level 1 to level 2. Can you see that? Then I'm going to go from level 2 to level 3. You can see that changed as well. Now we have inverse ghosting happening. And then I'm going to go from level 3 to level 4. Oh, now we have crazy amounts of inverse ghosting. If we look at it, we can see it from here. Massive amounts of inverse ghosting. Terrible. So we don't like that. We like level 2.
Also, as a side note, I did a quick screen grab of each one of the levels, level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. Here on level 1, you can see there's a black trail behind that alien. Level 2, that black trail has been reduced. Also, if you look at the white dots, you can kind of see the differences there. Level 3, the white dots have decreased, but you can start to see some inverse ghosting that's happening. On the red edge, it's very visible, but you can also see it around the alien. And then level 4, you just get extreme inverse ghosting. And from the other YouTube channels that have talked about this, they don't even get down to 1 millisecond response time, even with the extreme inverse ghosting. So most people agree that level 2 is the best one. In my personal testing, I definitely agree with that. Level 2 is the best option for me. So it's kind of a, do you like level 2 versus level 3? I hate inverse ghosting, so level 2 is 100% where I will land every single time.
That's just kind of going over the different configurations of the monitor. And the last piece that I really wanted to talk about for this specific monitor is this panel just really changed. This was really a little frustrating to me because I thought I was getting an LG panel, but I'm not. So there's a power button on the bottom here. The very bottom button is the power button. I'm going to push the power button. So now my screen is powered off. I can get to the service menu if I hold, there's a button on the top. There's a button on the top right here. It's right here. And there's a button on the bottom. If I hold the menu button and the power button, which is the top button and the bottom button at the same time, I'm going to hold them at the same time, and then it's going to power on. So I held the top button and the bottom button, which was the power and the menu button, for like 4 seconds or 5 seconds. It's going to power on. It's going to flicker a little bit. It always flickers when it powers on. It's kind of funky. And now the light's on, so we're just waiting for it to power on. Now we're back on. But now we are in the service mode. So if I click on this, there's going to be a service piece. So now I can see the service mode, and you can see on the panel we have a BOE MV27 That's not the LG panel that everybody reviewed. So thanks, HP. You gave all the reviewers one monitor, and you're selling a completely different monitor. Awesome. So that's a little frustrating. So you need to know that going into it. The reviews for the X27q probably won't apply to you because you're going to get a different panel than what they gave to their reviewers. So just to kind of wrap up, could the panel be faster? Yes, it could. It could be a lot faster. But for the price, you get a lot. It's on par with a lot of the other IPS panels in terms of speed. Other monitors might give you swivel, they'll give you a KVM switch, more contrast, slightly other things, but is it worth an extra $100, $200, $300, $400 for that? Not really. I would definitely recommend this monitor for the price. So to take it back out of service, so if I click this again, it's going to take me back to the service menu. To get rid of the service menu, all we have to do is turn the monitor off and then turn it back on, and it'll get rid of the service menu. So I powered it back on. It does this funny thing where it flickers when it powers on. Mine does this every single time it turns on. I don't know if it's a defect or what, but it turns on every time. Actually, I had an issue once where it did this, where it went to sleep and it would not wake from sleep. And I had multiple I have a HDMI connected to it too. So I disconnected my HDMI to think that was the issue. Maybe it was trying to go into the other input, but that was not the issue. It wouldn't wake from sleep unless I powered it off and then powered it back on. So that's happened to me once, and I think it's happened to other people on the internet as well. So definitely keep that in mind. It might have issues waking from sleep, but that's really it. In terms of the panel itself, I mean, taking a look at these two panels, 27-inch monitor is definitely really great. I love the size. And the size is something that you don't really have to get used to. The 32-inch panel was so much bigger. I mean, my kids thought it was a TV when it shipped here. It was massive. 27-inch doesn't actually, to me, it doesn't feel that much bigger than a 24-inch. It's definitely much bigger. You get a lot more real estate, and I have a higher DPI, so I have like 109 DPI versus something lower. But in terms of how it feels, in games, I didn't need to relearn how to play the game like I did with the 32. Like the 32-inch, I felt like a fish out of water when I was playing. The 27-inch felt really, really comfortable. I really like the real estate of the 32-inch. I think I'm either going to get an ultra-wide or a really big 32-inch eventually, but I think I'm waiting for like OLED panels to get better before that happens. And I'm kind of a cheapskate, so I mean the $150 X27q is right up my alley, even though it's a BOE panel, even though I believe it's slower than the HP panel, but or not the HP, the LG panel, but I still think it's a good buy. But definitely buy it on sale. Don't buy it for the $300, is it $300 retail or $250? Don't buy it for retail. Buy it for $200 or less. If you can find it for $160, that's the best price I've ever seen it at. And then I got some rebates and I got it for $150, but that was with the rebates and stuff. So $160 is the $159.99 is the best price I've seen it at. So it's a great monitor. Definitely check it out, and let me know what you guys think.